Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Wednesday, March 6th City Council Work Session. Meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Before we start public comment, I need to apologize for last evening. I had a senior moment and I lent a citizen speak at the end of the meeting during good of the order when they should have presented their comment during public comment. And I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm human. And just remind everyone that public comment is at the beginning of the meeting. And again, I'll try not to have that happen again. So for public comment tonight, we will start with the audience. Keep it under 3 minutes and be kind and respectful. Anyone in the audience? Okay, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to make public comment? If you would raise your hand, please. Okay. So this evening, we're having a discussion on the Cannon Beach Elementary budget and design development review. Yes, would you like to?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yes, we have representatives from CETA, which is Dustin Johnson and Ben. I only know you as Ben Carlson, right? I should. And he's from Remick, and he is representing the CMGC, or the construction manager, general contractor on the project. And this meeting is almost a precursor to our meeting on the 19th, and that we're going to be talking about where we are in terms of the design development review and costing. And we are going to be talking about costs, on that night too. So this kind of presents where we are, where we see ourselves right now. And that includes a lot of work that's already been done to reduce budgets. Because, it's an environment where costs are going up quite quickly. And as we've talked about, we've been deferred for a long time. So we've had that escalation tacked on to the project. So we're already working on it, and you'll see what some of those things are tonight. And that'll kind of lead us into the discussion on the 19th. So with that, it's going to be Dustin or Ben?
Dustin first.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Noppen, members of council, thanks for having us here tonight. Always a pleasure. So what we're going to be presenting tonight is the design development drawings as they were issued towards the end of last year. There's 80 sheets. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to breeze through some of them very quickly, even just title of it. Others that have more pertinent information for you all that have changed D to DD. We'll zoom in on and talk about those a little bit. I'd ask if there is a sheet that I start questions about what might be on that sheet, please just stop me. Jump into it. Before I share my screen and get into that, maybe a little discussion on how we foresee the next couple of weeks and what we hope to gain at the end of that next couple of weeks. So we're coming back to you next week for the city council hearing to approve site modifications that were inspired through the DRB process and the resulting community involvement. And then on the 19th, we reconvene and we go over comments received by Cannon Beach Together, which the design team and Remick and the city are currently collaborating to respond to. At the end of that effort on the 19th, what we would be looking for from you is approval to move into the construction document phase of the project to maintain the schedule that we'll be presenting after I complete these drawings. So if that all sounds fair, I'll go ahead and get to it with the drawings. And again, we can revisit what our goals are for the next couple of weeks at the end of the next couple of weeks. But at the end of it, we're hoping for your authorization for CETA and our consultants to move forward with construction documents.
So I'd like to clarify one item. we heard from two citizens, Sam and Paul Duper. I wouldn't identify them as being part of Cannon Beach Together.
Or I've heard the name, I don't know if there any who's associated, what,
That's right, but so we're gonna be responding to the questions that we received from Sam and Paul.
it's on the 19th.
Right,
And those are the comments that I am referring to.
Okay.
I apologize if I
that's okay.
spoke where that came from, but yes,
The other group didn't identify themselves, so we're,
gotcha.
thanks.
You bet. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here to look at these drawings. And again, please stop me if I get into a sheet that I'm skipping past and you'd like more information on. Okay, first sheet is our cover sheet, drawing index with all the sheets presented in this set is in the upper right-hand corner there, project team on the left. This is a fire and life safety sheet. Again, this is design development level. This is one sheet that you can expect to be further developed in construction documents, as are most of these sheets. We get into our civil sheets. This is a for reference overall site plan. We get into some construction details, walls, but on the story circle. Some general notes to keep in mind throughout the civil set and a legend. This here is a demo plan. This is a good one to take a look at. It shows very clearly what is proposed to be removed from the existing site. This crosshatch up here indicates asphalt. So we have asphalt in the north courtyard. We have asphalt down here in Beaver Avenue. All that in this set is being proposed to be removed for further treatment as defined later in the set. Excuse me. Okay, moving on. This is another site plan, civil site plan. This one has keynotes identifying all the major civil elements that are then associated with details for further clarifications. Details on ADA access ramps. Or ADA access ramp details, signage details, hardscape painting details like crosswalks. Here we get into the grading plan. This would be another good one to look at. One thing I do want to clarify, you're going to see Thunderbird Garden in here as well as the former site layout. Again, that has not been approved yet. We're coming back next week and requesting formal approve that through the hearing. This drawing set is a snapshot in time, and that is around the end of October last year. A lot has happened between now and October, but this is the set that has been priced that we're presenting a budget on. Utilities, site utilities. Just a note here, because of the right-of-way partial acquisition of Beaver Avenue into the project site, this sheet is going to be showing relocation of the water line. That water main is currently located closer to the school structure, so that is having to be located out further into the right-of-way and then repaving that right-of-way. This sheet will likely go away in its entirety since we no longer have the Thunderbird Garden or this faux stream that's collecting stormwater. Site conveyance details, additional site utility details, this time specific to water service to the building. Water service details, and then we get into landscape. All of these landscape plans are going to see heavy modification pending approval of the revised design next week. I do have those plans available as you saw them a couple of weeks ago, ready to pull up, toggle back and forth if needed for discussion purposes. Go ahead and buzz past all of these landscape drawings. We get into the architectural site plan doesn't reveal much more at this level than the civil site plan. These next few drawings we consider these are base drawings. These would have been drawings that are presented in the schematic design set. So from schematic design to design development, there's a little more development. For example, up here, we've got different wall assemblies for the exterior walls. That helps Bremick then take those construction elements and give a more realistic price to deal with the schematic design set. Mezzanine plan, our new stair. This is our roof plan. This roof plan showing existing TPO system to remain, new TPO, which is a single ply membrane, roofing membrane, that is being applied over the heritage lobby, and then our standing seam metal roof over the gym. Elevations, which look a lot like our schematic design elevations, with the exception of we're now getting a little bit more into the details of what those materials are, and that's in our elevation material legend. More elevations, then we move into building sections. Most of these are transverse sections through either the gym or the classroom building or the lobby. Our next sheet is longitudinal sections that cut through all three structures. This gives a good overall sense of the space and how each building is connected. And then we go into a zoomed in detail of that with individual wall sections in these next couple of sheets. You can expect in the next set of drawings that you see that there's going to be substantially more of these types of drawings from wall sections, and then even further into the detail sheets where we're really starting to figure out what these systems are, how architectural relates to structural, structural relates to mechanical, and the details of how it's all assembled. More wall sections. This wall section here in the center, I'll point this out because this is something that will be new to council. The canopy that runs along the gym in the north courtyard, for seismic purposes, we would propose that we keep about a foot clear between that canopy, the edge of the canopy, and the roof of the gym. The reason for that, the gym is much taller than this structure. Their periodic frequencies do not, when the ground starts to shake, they shake back and forth at different rates. We think that this is okay because we have plenty of coverage over the walkway itself. So you're not going to find people wandering between this column here and the edge of the building where you would start to see a little bit of rainfall up against the building. So we still plan on full coverage there. As we move, again, these are then now further zoomed in details of how we anticipate all the construction elements to come together at soffits, openings, at wall bases, etc. These T sheets are, the T is for tenant improvement. This is where we then start to zoom in a little bit more into each of the buildings, the classroom building and the heritage lobby on one sheet, gym on its own sheet. And we do that so we can get into a little bit more detail as to the interior construction elements, what those materials are, what those systems are. You're going to see things on here that you haven't seen before. And I want to point these out. You see these rhombus shapes here in the classrooms. This was going to be a proposed acoustical treatment in those rooms. You'll see when we go over the budget, that is not in the budget. So I'm pointing this out that this is something that's going to be modified and you won't see this likely in the next round of drawings. More on that as we get into the budget. You're going to see a little bit of that here in the gym reflected ceiling plan as well. In addition to the acoustic treatments, you also see lighting placement. And these are floor finish plans. So each hatch has its own respective floor finish. These floor finishes will get defined further and further as we go through the budgeting analysis, start to figure out areas where we can really begin to tightened down to meet budget constraints. Same thing with the interior elevations and large elevations at the bathrooms, and that's what this is. Right now, you're seeing a lot of tile in these rooms, and we'll talk about cost saving measures for that as we get into the budget discussion. And then we get into our structural drawings. This is a foundation plan. This shows all the new footings required for the new heritage lobby, for all of the canopy structure. With this set for the structural discipline in this set, we haven't quite gotten to seismic analysis in the gym building, in the classroom building. So that is to be further developed and represented in the next drawing set. Same thing with the roof framing plan, mostly focused on the heritage lobby addition, as well as the canopy structures in between, and just framing members, the beams, the sheathing. In some cases, the what we call car decking, the solid rebuy decking that's above our heritage lobby, so it can be exposed to view and have a nice wood finish. This is the wind pressure diagram. This is more structural analysis than of use to extract during construction of the building. And then getting some thoughts down on structural details for the foundations. As we get into, this is the first of the electrical sheets. There's a lot of electrical sheets and mechanical sheets that are really just legends or tables that are to be populated during the construction document phase. Site lighting plan, this is another plan. You're going to see a lot of site lighting on here that you'll probably see us start to move away from, to eliminate. I think we've talked a little bit about site lighting as part of the adjusted landscape plans that we reviewed a couple of weeks ago with you, and we'll review again next week at our hearing. We're almost through these. Electrical site plan just showing where the electrical is coming in, which is same place it currently is. So we're expecting at this point to have a 1200 amp service, and the main switchgear for that service will be located in the lean-to to the gym. Electrical demo plans that'll get populated during construction documents, electrical legends, size gear. This is a good plan for us to take a quick look at, and again, more in relation to budget. So this is what Bremic has budgeted, and where you will see that we have recommended cost savings measures that would result in really cutting back on some of the light fixtures shown in this plan. So expect some pretty heavy modifications to this plan moving forward. Power layout for the classrooms, for the gym, for the kitchen, for the mezzanine. No electrical on the roof plans. This could very well go away, this sheet. And then we get into one line diagrams for electrical. And then these tables here for the new panels that are expected, that are branching off the main switchgear will get populated as the circuits are developed during construction documents. And then mechanical. There's only really one sheet on mechanical I want to pause on, and that's this sheet here. So mechanical for this building is proposed at this point to be pretty simple, and it's comprised of 2 ERV units, one of them located in this storage area off of classroom number 3. These are electric resistance units. They get their heat through electric resistance. There's no cooling capacity. So the coolest you'll ever feel in this current system is the temperature of outside air. You'll see in the budget estimate that we present tonight, there's an option to go to a VAV type system, which allows for both heating and cooling. And it's quite a bit of an add. We'll talk about that when we get to budget in more detail. the second of the ERV units. This first one here just serves the classroom building. The second one's located up on the mezzanine. What's not shown here is that this actually branches over to the left into the Heritage Lobby and serves the Heritage Lobby. And then there's a single duct as opposed to the two shown here that will run out the full length of the gym. Return error will just be handled through large louver in the wall of the mezzanine. And then expected mechanical details, plumbing very much the same. Plumbing demolition plan. Plumbing routes for a new sewer and water distribution. Primarily at toilet room locations and drains in the kitchen. And then vent details and other miscellaneous plumbing details. This last is telecommunications, which is really just sheets being populated for further development. And that's the DD set. So are there any drawings that I skipped past that you would like to go into further detail on, or do you want to start the discussion on budget? And I'll remind you or suggest that as we get into budget, inevitably there's going to be drawings that we're going to want to go back to discuss. This is what we're proposing modifying. And we'll go into more detail into those specific drawings at that time, but happy to revisit any drawings that I may have skipped over too fast.
Anyone have questions? Okay,
Thanks for sticking with me through that. That's pretty dry, going through technical sheets one by one. As a reminder, here's the updated landscape plan that we'll be bringing back for formal approval next week. And then as we get into the budget discussion with the landscaping, we can always come back to this. All right, and so starts the discussion on budget estimate. I'll turn it over to Ben.
Okay, thank you everyone for having me here. So my name is Ben Carlson with Bremick Construction. We've been collaborating early on with CETA and the city to work with a project and come up with a successful project for the Cannon Beach Elementary School. What you'll see on the screen here is two different cost estimates. The right side is the SD, which is schematic design cost estimate, and the left side is the DD, which is design development cost estimate. So the DD estimate is the most current estimate. Before we dive into it too far, I want to talk a little bit about process. So in construction projects, there's a series of milestones where there's different drawing issuances that progressively get more detailed throughout the project. At schematic design, oftentimes we're working off of renderings or photographs, and in this case, there were narratives for some of the scope items. And so as you step through the next milestones there, but from SD to DD, you start to get more developed. You see the drawings that Dustin shared on the screen just recently. So those are developing quite a bit from the SD set. The next milestones will probably be a 50% construction document set and then the final permit set. So it's a series of checks along the way so that we can see how the design is evolving and also how the budget is performing in relation to that design. So when we, as Bremick, develop a cost estimate, since the construction hard cost, which is the actual tangible construction piece of the building, take the lion's share of that estimate, we take it very seriously as far as how we develop those. So we take the drawings, we will do our own internal estimate and base our own historical data on that. We also take the opportunity to share those drawings out with a different trade partner in each of the major trades to test the current market conditions for those trades and get a current understanding of the cost estimate for those individual items. So as far as how the budget is performing, so you'll see the top half, which I'll spend most of my time talking about since as the contractor we're tasked with the construction hard cost piece. You can see between the two dark sections at the top right there, we track the same items between the SD on the right and the DD on the left, so we can see any variances between those. The SD cost estimate, and I apologize, I did not bring my glasses, so I'm going to go off memory. We'll just say 9.3. And maybe I can peek at Dustin's computer here. The DD cost estimate was coming in at we've worked diligently with CETA and the city to identify some of those. I'll remind everyone that this project has been pushing out close to a year at this point. Someone mentioned earlier, it was correct that costs continue to escalate as that process goes on. So we're fighting against time with this as well. So every month longer it takes that, prices continually rise as well. So we'll see a line item in here for escalation. Just looking at these line by line, I think that the majority of the items that we're seeing, and we'll have actually another slide that we'll dive into, were around some of the systems and structural pieces that are on here. Before we take a deeper dive into the executive summary that we put together, are there any initial questions on the construction piece? Okay, can we switch slides? Sure. Okay, thank you for driving, by the way. So the slide that you'll see on the screen now is what we've assembled as a team called, and we're calling this the executive summary, just to try to distill down some of a very lengthy amount of information into some more smaller number of items. So what you'll see is the top number is the 9,349,818, which was the schematic design construction cost estimate start point. There's a next section titled scope additions. And so this is an itemized list, which we can talk through. And the next section is scope reductions, which are some items that were proactively worked on as part of a team here, and as well as in response to council's direction around landscape. So those total to the bottom line, which is the same number that we discussed, the 9,672,000. And the intent of this document is to really provide the roadmap summary of where the numbers changed. So I will go item by item and try to be relatively brief. As far as scope additions, Dustin mentioned this earlier when we were looking at the sheet. There was some additions into the underground utilities and paving scope in Beaver Street. So primarily around relocation of the water line, as well as a full street repave for that section adjacent to the school. That's about $118,000 item. The next item on the list was seismic and structural scope drawing clarifications. So this is one of the larger ticket items, and as drawings continue to evolve, there's more information. And so that also then is captured in the pricing as the drawings get more detailed. So that's around a $382,000 item. Well, looking at the acoustics for the project, there's an allowance being carried for gym acoustics. And so that's about a $119,000 item. We're currently working through that as a team to make recommendations to council as to what that treatment will be. The next item is increasing the electrical service size from the anticipated 800 amps to design 1200 amps. So as the electrical engineers become involved with the project, we move from a narrative description into a more detailed description. So in this case, that service size increased. Another item that we saw a significant development in was the light fixture allowance increase. So this was around $190,000 from the original light fixture allowance assumption. You'll see when we get down into the scope reductions that this is an area that the team identified as some potential cost savings. So collectively, we agreed that a targeted reduction of 25%, which would be 65,000 of that, would be removed from the project in order to keep this close to the original budget price point. Next items were general conditions for extended schedule, as well as general requirements. So several of the items that we'll talk about today have a schedule impact on what we call the critical path to the schedule, which increase the overall duration. Those are primarily around the additional street work and also the additional structural and seismic scope. So it's about a month to the project. So we'll be looking at an 11-month project. Next item was relatively minor, but the archaeological investigation phase support was about a $16,000 item. And the next item, which we've touched on a number of times, is inflation and escalation. So currently in the new 9.672 number, there's a $325,000 line item intended to offset inflation until October of 2024, when project commencement is planned. So the subtotal of those additions was around 1.3 million. So we worked as a team and in response to some other feedback to identify some cost reduction items as well, which can be implemented into the project. The first of which was reducing the landscaping and site furnishing scope. So that was around a $216,000 reduction. The next item was in relation to some structural concerns as well as creating a great space, and that would be painting the gym structure in lieu of media blasting, which is removal of any of the original painting. So that was about a $42,000 reduction. And we also took a look at some of the configurations for the building, looking at the previous classrooms. They had 3 new doors planned into those. So looking proactively at removing one of those so that there's only 2, as well as some material changes. So that resulted in another reduction. Another item that we looked at as a team is how the space would work functionally. So looked at removing the operable wall partition and structural support, which was going to be installed between 2 of the classrooms. That resulted in about a $63,000 reduction. And also, as Dustin mentioned, looking at some of the finishes and where some things could be adjusted without an overall detrimental effect to the project. And one of those items was changing restroom wall and floor tile to polished concrete and a different type of paint on the walls. That was a fairly significant item at $55,000 reduction. I touched on this one earlier about reducing the updated interior light fixture package by 25%. So that was another $65,000 reduction. This is a pretty common one to go through, and it's selecting alternate fixtures in lieu of some of the originally requested fixtures, and we'll work closely with CETA to maintain excellent quality space. Reducing the precast concrete cladding panels, which are on the base of the exterior of the building by 50%. That's about a $37,000 reduction. And then we looked at some material selections as well, utilizing different types of wood. So that would be a $23,000 reduction. Dustin mentioned roofing. We looked at some opportunities to change some roofing systems, and on the infill addition area, in lieu of the originally assumed metal roofing, we'd be putting TPO roofing on that, also an excellent product. And looking at some other items about how we can make some systems changes. In this case, adding a mobile generator docking station to the gear in lieu of a stationary generator. So that was a significant item at $135,000. Gym and classroom equipment reductions, looking at some of the AV type equipment and some smart reductions that can be made without compromising the quality of the space, was about a $47,000 reduction. And the last item is kind of the catch-all for some of the other items that collectively the team worked together as far as what could be adjusted in the scope in order to try to get back closer to the original budget. So if you go through all the math there, that ends up at that $9,672,131 current design development construction hard cost number. And that's what's reflected in the dark section of the overall project estimate that we'll move back to shortly. Very last item on here below the line is the canopy extension to the food bank. So this will be funded from other sources. So that's shown where it is below the line.
Can I just cover that part?
Go ahead, Bruce.
We're trying to bring in another building to be the food bank. And we're planning to use the space that we would plan to have for the city hall function. And then when we're done with that, then we would bring it into this project. That will be paid for by general fund because it's not subject to TLT. And then when you have the interior courtyard, there's an awning that goes over in front of the classroom and along the side of the gym, both sides, along 2 sides of the gym, that we will be putting in an awning for the food bank that we would not put in for any other reason. And so for that reason, you're seeing that we would need to come up with the difference in that 163 if we want to have that awning. And I think we do want to have that awning, but we wouldn't take it out of TLT. And then the cost of the modular that we'll be using for City Hall, I would probably find it would probably all be general fund. We'll probably split it to a degree because It's not it's for another project. We would be buying the modular unit and then have half of that be paid for somehow tied to the project, which would be the city hall project. And then half of it would be the cost of leaving it at the TBE. So we're just working with some accounting things and you see one of them right there.
Any questions on any of those items before we switch back to the other slide? Next time I'll bring my glasses so I can look up at you all instead of stare at the screen the whole time. So,
So I have a question about the generator.
yes.
There won't be a generator there. There'll be kind of
It would be a docking station, so where you plug a mobile generator in, similar to what the pump house situation. So those types of things. So the idea, I believe, was that the existing generators could be used for that if it was determined that the school should be hooked up.
okay.
It seemed like a really smart way to utilize existing resources.
And we've only have to do that with one now. I think we were doing it with 3 or 4 before.
Yeah.
Now we're down to 1 that we have to bring something in. But this is partly for heat. That if we ever find ourselves in a situation like 2007, we have this large space that's heated.
Okay, good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm interested in a little more detail on the scope reductions. So the first item, the landscape, you've identified additional things from what we've already looked at, or is that inclusive of what we've looked at?
I'll call this the DD plus estimate. So we've been working since the design development set was issued. I think we've all been part of the conversation about the landscaping evolution. So what this is reflective of the Thunderbird Garden being removed from the scope. And then we've also developed some initial pricing based on the last landscape scene that you saw that Dustin presented to council. So the idea with this is that we're looking ahead at this point as well, so that we can understand what some of those changes are. Largely, you know, there was the reduction of the garden itself, and a lot of the other components were just kind of moved around on site. I think there was some really intelligent things done with that landscaping design to respond to the request and not compromise the quality of that space. Did I answer your question?
I'm not sure.
It should fund with the last thing that you saw. And it'll be that much less, or that number is, it'll be that much less than what it would have been had we kept the Thunderbird Garden.
So in other words, we'd save $216,000 by changing the design of the landscape.
Correct. With simplifying the landscaping, that's the round number, yes.
When we look at the hard cost comparison from the previous sheet, the landscaping previously was estimated at 386,000 and currently estimated at 249. So that's $137,000. So I'm just curious if we were talking about additional reductions.
Right. So the numbers don't align up exactly between the two, because with this one that we have on the screen here, so some of those costs are blended between the landscape and site development lines. So for example, the modular pavers in the plaza area would be considered a site development item, where in this case, landscape was that. And so it's really some blended items in order to try to keep it at a more summarized level on the slides that you're seeing right here. So there is a little bit of crossover. It's all there, it just depends on how it's fed into which bucket.
Good explanation. Can you just explain the second item, paint gym structure in lieu of media blasting? I'm not.
Of course. Sorry, I live in this world all the time. I didn't mean to glaze over anything. So when we initially had met and looked at the site, we thought and collaborated that we thought it would probably be approach that we anticipated was that the existing gym structure would be media blasted, which what that is, nobody calls it sand blasting anymore because it's not silica. There's other media that's used for that. So it's a process to remove the existing paint from the gym, and that would expose the wood structure that's there. And so there's a cost related to that paint removal. And as the more cost-effective option there, just looking at how the space was, the decision was made to not remove the paint. There was also a concern from the structural engineer that removal of the outer edge of the material as well would be negative for the existing structure. So in lieu of that, the decision was made to paint the existing structure. So overall, it resulted in a healthy cost savings.
And can we keep going on the third item, the exterior doors for the classroom?
Certainly. Do you mind pulling up the plan? That'd be easier. So if you zoom in on the classroom, so if you see on the top side of the classrooms right there, there were two doors out into the courtyard area. And on the bottom side of the drawings there were doors out into the Beaver Street side. So just looking at areas where maybe there was more things that needed to be for it to function successfully, that was one. We can eliminate those doors, and then that would be just new solid wall siding, similar to the adjacent structure. Looking at those types of things, it could be modified from the project and not overall affect the functionality.
So I'll just add that this was an item where it was a program-driven want to be able to open these classrooms up as much as possible to the north courtyard. The third door, so in each of these rooms, the door that we're proposing to remove is not a requirement to meet egress.
What would you replace those with? A window or the wall?
It would be reconfigured in the elevation, so the exterior view to be a solid wall section. And I think that would just be some slight revision to the configuration of the walls and doors in order so that it made sense aesthetically.
I think the next couple items are obvious. On the reduced lighting,
This is a pretty common one to see in projects. And so we'll see where, you know, the wish list of lighting comes in sometimes more than what the budget will allow. And so we regularly work with the electrical engineer and with the designers to either one, reduce the number of fixtures, or two, select alternate fixtures with a similar aesthetic to meet the intent of the space that'll be at a lower cost point. So this is what we call target value design, where as a team, we've identified that we feel that 25% reduction from that increase is very achievable. So we'd work with the CETA team and the electrical engineer to identify what those are.
okay, reduce exterior precast concrete cladding panels.
Right. I have to remind myself, we've looked at these drawings so many times and you all just saw them, so apologies for going too quickly over that. So Dustin will zoom in. There we go. You're doing great, by the way. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
But you'll see this band at the bottom. It's about a 2-foot tall section of precast concrete. And so what that is would be a board form type section of concrete that's brought in and it's run along the base of the building. That's something that's at a higher price point than just the shingle siding or board and batten siding we're seeing elsewhere. And so that's one where we looked at where that could be removed from the skin and not affect the performance of the building, or looking at how that could be redetailed in a way so that there's a cost savings.
Okay,
So I can add a little bit of background there too, and maybe it might make more sense instead of looking at an elevation. Here's that nighttime rendering that we're familiar with, and you see that concrete base at the bottom extending across from the gym past the new addition, then on into the classroom area.
So we'd work with CETA to be able to maintain that in the important places on the building, but sometimes what we call the back of house areas where you don't see those quite as much, those are areas where you can reduce some costs and not affect the overall project.
I think that answers most of mine.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one question. Are you anticipating in the washrooms where you're changing from tile to concrete, are you anticipating having that concrete colored?
It could be, there's a modest price increase for that, but it's not nearly as significant as the reduction. I mean, it's probably a couple dollars a square foot increase over what the polished concrete would be. We do both regularly, and I think either could look fantastic in
Yeah, it does look, it can look wonderful. And it's a lot lower maintenance than tile, which,
it is, you don't have to worry about the grout lines.
Right.
It's a very durable surface, and so I think that, you know, CETA has a great interiors team. I think that they could make some good selections and recommendations for us about how to make that look great.
If you have any specific questions about how we would do that, Maya Blue, our Director of Interiors, is on tonight and she can go into more detail as to.
I don't need it at this point. I just like the idea of doing that because it's just, the result is beautiful. And yet it's lower cost and lower maintenance.
That was also a theme we discussed when we were looking at some of the cost reduction items. It's how some of the building maintenance operations could potentially be reduced in the long run as well. Thank you for your question.
Are y'all going to be talking about ad alternates at all?
We weren't planning to tonight. We hadn't prepared for that.
Okay, let me just give a bit of an example. There are things that are shown as being taken out. There might be some elements that you want to say, if we can afford to do it, I would really like to see that come back. And an example, in the lighting, if you recall, there were bollards 48 inches all the way through the garden and a bunch of other places. Well, those came back in like 13,000 a piece, 1,300 a piece. 1,300 a piece, I'm sorry. Right there, that's how, yeah.
A lot of money there, like that.
Just like that. But if we wanted to replace a certain number of those, we could say for 15 or 20 bollards, what would the cost be to go ahead and put those in? And we can do it as an alternate. And then we'll have a base bid. And if the base bid is below where we want it, we have to have it. Then we could potentially say, well, let's go ahead and add those things back in. We're just not ready for that yet, but I would anticipate that we would be using some ad alternates.
Comments, common practice. Thank you for bringing that up, Bruce.
Sure, no worries. Thank you.
I guess one more clarification, with the canopy extension to the food bank below the bottom line, does that mean it's included in that 9.672?
No.
Okay.
Okay. There's no other questions. We'll switch back to the overall project budget side. I'll hand it back to Dustin to walk through some of the soft cost pieces for the project.
Yes, you all may remember soft costs for the project are those things that don't result in direct construction materials for the project. So those include design fees for all disciplines. They include studies. We've got state preservation allowance on here, reimbursable expenses. All of those you'll see over on the right-hand side, there's $35,780 difference between what was presented almost a little over a year ago to today. That $35,780 was the result of a single change from what was presented before. That's this last item here, additional SD services. So that was to allow CETA architectural team to continue to spearhead the schematic design process months beyond what we had originally intended that duration to be. Other than that, these fees all remain the same. These jurisdictional testing FF&E fees are estimates. They were estimates at the SD phase. They continue us to hold true through the DD phase. They include things such as the archaeology report, geotech report, but the higher dollar items are jurisdictional fees like permitting and SDC fees. And then you'll see, a large ticket item here, the FF&E furnishing, so that's fixtures, furnishings and equipment. Things like, site appurtenances, or special fixtures. Maybe that holds some tribal or cultural interpretive elements could come from that bucket.
And also possibly like cabinet work. Something, yeah.
And then that gives us, that brings our total to 11 million on the low end, 11,537,920. As compared to the previous low of 11,179,827. For a net difference of a positive $358,093. And then that same net difference carries over at the high end from 11,752,852 from the previous 11,394,759. Then we take 5% of that number for owner contingency. So again, there's a low and a high. And then that contributes to the grand total of 12.114 at the low end to 12.340 at the high end. And that net difference from almost a year ago being the 558,990 at the low end and 569,740 at the high end. Are there any questions related to the soft costs?
No surprises in any of it? I mean, you're anticipating anything that,
As far as the soft costs?
Yeah.
The only surprises would be, and we're gonna talk about schedule next, but I think hopefully we're at the end of the schedule slipping significantly.
Right.
And now we're committed to moving forward in the construction documents, construction. So
Oh, I have a question.
please.
Have any archaeological reports been generated yet at this time?
There is a preliminary archaeological report from the study done this past summer. It's currently being finalized. And we expect that report to come out in the next month or 2 months.
I heard, a lot of people sound as if they're concerned about, plumbing affecting the, causing digging to happen and that will maybe impact, Native American burial sites, et cetera, things like that. Do you see that as an issue?
I can take this one. So it's not uncommon on a project to have what's called an inadvertent discovery plan, which would be, we'll implement procedures in order around any sensitive areas to not disturb any sensitive or known areas. But if for some reason something is found, there's a procedure as far as what the notifications are, work is stopped so that there's no disruption of the site. And I think that that's also something that will come as part of the final report. But it's something where we've kept in mind as we're crafting our approach to the project, where we're looking in particular at some of the deeper pipe runs. I think in the street, for example, where the water main is replaced, could be something where we have to be very careful around that and just dig very carefully and with good observation to not disturb anything.
You have, I'm just curious. I don't know how this is done. Do you have an archaeologist on site or how would you know if you were?
There's oftentimes a spotter on the ground in if there's a known area. So it's somebody that's watching for this. Part of what's produced in the archaeological study is any areas that are known. And so those are some things where we may even look at as a team where we're rerouting pipe routes or something potentially around an area if it's known to be an archaeological site.
Okay.
And did you say you do have the results from this summer or you're expecting the results from this summer?
We have preliminary reports, and what that means is we have the locations of where they did their test pits. And we have a general description of the soils and if anything was found in those pits. What they're doing right now is taking what was found, could be stones, and really analyzing those in a lab to see if they were actual cultural artifacts or if that's just a natural stone, for example.
Yeah, I
without further purpose.
kind of checked in with them just about every day.
Yeah.
And they were not excited about anything that they found being
No.
something that,
All indications so far is from all the test pits that they dug, especially as you go further towards the estuary where more sand was brought in.
Yeah.
Uh, this past summer, they were only allowed to go down, I believe it was 2 meters, a little over 6 feet. And so really for them to discover anything much beyond the north courtyard area, all indications are they would have needed to have gone deeper.
yeah, that's all because of the fill there.
I will say it is a valid concern. We have been in contact with and are currently in process with State Historic Preservation Office or SHPO. And all indications are that they will probably require an archaeologist to be on site during grading operations. If anything is found, then you bring in a tribal member to help identify what that is, and then the inadvertent discovery plan kicks in as to how to treat that particular artifact. Tribal.
Do you have any idea when you might get the final report?
Last I checked, with, University of, Portland State University, who conducted that research, it was going to be this spring, and that was a month ago or 2 weeks ago that I last talked.
So in this, you say in the spring?
Yes, this spring. As we get closer to Beaver Street, there is more of a concern that we could find something. And that also holds true for the south end of the gym and then the classroom building as well. So, it'll be, I think if we do find anything, what these preliminary reports are showing is that it'll probably be localized to that area.
And there was some previous archaeological work done too, and you have those results.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, there had been ground penetration studies done on site, that with a fairly high level of confidence located where, the longhouses were likely located on the site. But that's about to the extent of, the detail that really got into it.
Yeah.
Without actually, removing soil, it's really hard to get a good view up there.
And is burial sites the biggest concern, or are there other concerns there, just artifacts?
Artifacts in general, so far, there's.
I mean, it was described to me as there was evidence maybe of shell middens on that south side.
So I had not heard that. Certainly not in anything that Doug Doerr's team with PSU has released in their findings.
What would be a concern?
For example, so they had found some stones that were potentially identified as potential firestones during that preliminary archaeological report. And that was in one of the 20-something test pits that were done. And that was really about the limit of what they found, with a couple of other minor things. Through lab studies, we just found out from Doug Doerr yesterday or the day before that those actually are firestones, or were firestones that had been cracked and then repurposed as tools. So there have been some artifacts identified through this process.
Dustin, is the street treated any different than the school site in terms of the excavation and what you need to do?
It'll be the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So the main concern in the street there, of course, we're repaving, but that's fairly shallow. The main concern will be when we relocate the water main from what now is part of the subject site back into the public right of way, where we need to excavate down a couple, 2, 3 feet, 4 feet. I'm not quite sure the final depth of what that'll be. But Any other questions regarding the soft costs?
Nope.
All right, so let's dive into the scheduled discussion, and I do want to, I failed to mention something at the beginning that Ben touched on, so he talked about 50% construction documents real quick. With the value targeted modifications that we just reviewed as part of the budget, we realize that that's a fairly significant change to some of these drawings, and what we want to prevent is having the next time that you all have a chance to preview the drawings being right before we submit for permit. So we would like to come back to you. I think right now internally, we have 50% construction documents scheduled for beginning of May. So we would want to come back somewhere around mid-May and have a real thorough page turn, something beyond what we did today, to go over, because that's going to be a much more representative set of what you're going to get in the end because of these value targeted changes. So moving into the design schedule, again, DD is on the left, schematic design is on the right. You can see schematic design, we talked about that being extended beyond what was anticipated. It was planned to be completed in April 4th, 2023. That carried on to beginning of summer 2023. Design development then started. It was originally planned to start March of 2023 and carry on to November. In actuality, it started mid-June and carried on through February of this year. Construction drawings. We have on here a date of 2/20/24 to start on construction drawings. In SD, we had anticipated to have started on those summer of last year. And both of these are for an approximate duration of 3.5 months. I want to point out the 2/20/24 date on construction drawings now. You heard me asking for authorization to move forward with construction documents at the end of our 3/19 meeting, or fairly close to that. I can still commit to this 2/20 date and being complete by 6/27/24 because we take on a little bit of risk that we feel comfortable with in areas that don't have a lot or are not expected to have a lot of change, like seismic retrofits for the gym classroom building. We are working on those right now. So we haven't lost time yet. And that's why there's a discrepancy there of the 2/20 date. We have at some level taken risk and moved into construction documents in areas where we feel that risk is worth it to us to keep the project schedule on pace.
So how much longer after March 19th? Just ballpark.
A week to 2 weeks. Yeah. And then permit review and the GMP process, estimated about 3 months and a week previously. That hasn't changed substantially. It's just the date at which it starts. So we had the permit review process starting at 9/26/23. Now it's more January 1st, 2024. And that puts our construction kickoff to around the 1st of October this year. Previously anticipated over a year ago, we would already be in construction right now. And then the construction end, it's a 12-month duration.
I'm carrying 11 months as the construction duration based on the DD set.
Pardon me. So we were carrying 10 months prior, correct, a year ago, but now with the modifications to Beaver Avenue, we've added a month to that timeline. So now we're tracking a 11-month estimated construction schedule.
And the delay, those increased costs are reflected in the hard cost budget that we looked at.
They are, yes. The DD estimate includes the cost for that additional month.
Is that the inflation number or
It's the two.
construction?
Yeah, that say general conditions, and general requirements. So those are things like supervision of the project. So it's an additional month for those types of things. And then fixed costs were rental costs for temporary fencing and on and on.
That concludes our presentation, so we'll just open it up to further Q&A.
Anybody have additional questions? It was nice to be able to ask them as you went. Oh,
Yeah, I appreciate your explanations, because the drawings for me, I don't know how to look at, schematics for lighting or plumbing or, I don't know what those mean. So your explanation was pretty user-friendly. I appreciated that.
And we'll continue to do that. These drawing sets don't get smaller, they just get bigger and bigger as we.
I think Brandon's probably the only one who really knew what he was looking at.
Oh,
completely.
I had it all figured out.
It's quite complicated.
Yeah, it really is.
So,
I did have one question. You mentioned there were some changes in the classrooms. What changes are you making in the classrooms? Are planning to?
So we have these really beautiful renderings to show you all of the classrooms with really nice ceilings and lighting options and acoustic options. And with the budget being where it's at, there's just no chance that they would ever be implemented. But not the renderings, but the two-dimensional representation of those treatments or what you were seeing, like those diamond or rhombus shapes on the ceilings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it hurts to think that we even have those tucked away somewhere, but the responsible thing is to just keep them in our archives. It's not something that I foresee this project being able to fund. And the gym, a little bit different. The gym requires acoustic treatment. So we will be bringing forth, in fact, we have, as of a couple days ago, updated renderings at the gym with these acoustic options that have been approved by our structural team. That was a big thing because with that gym, one of the main deficiencies right now is its ability to carry gravity loads. So having to keep the systems very light. So we have those. I don't want to present them to you yet until we have some idea of cost. It could be that we get the cost back from Bremick and a couple of those options are just beyond what we feel comfortable presenting because they don't have a chance of being within the budget.
So these changes in the classroom, would they have been the acoustical kind of, would they have enhanced the acoustical aspect of the classrooms?
There was acoustic value to those systems, the ceilings, for example, that were in there. The lowest level option was a nicer version of acoustic ceiling tile. Higher cost options, what you saw in 2 dimensions on the drawings that we flipped there, those diamond shapes were the same material, but what we call clouds, so sort of sporadic use of those. The reason why we felt comfortable taking them out is that you don't have acoustic issues with those spaces currently. They're a nice to have, not a need to have in those spaces. Gym, it's a different.
Jim's terrible. Yeah.
But scope reductions, second to last item, gym and classroom equipment reductions. Where did you find savings there?
That was looking at consolidating and removing some of the items like large format projection screens, overhead projectors, and kind of taking a different look at how some of those items could be accomplished, just with a lens towards looking at overall cost reductions for the project. So.
And then do you have kind of a brief summary of the last item, the miscellaneous design and material refinement?
That was all the ones that would have made the list too long to put on one page.
Yes.
So, it's really
Examples of it? What are you?
some of those. So it's really just kind of how things were looked at too. So an estimate always goes up and down between projects, right? So in this case, or between milestones within the project rather. And in this case, it'd be some things where maybe we'd assume something that didn't actually come to fruition in the DD set. And so it's really just kind of an amalgamation of a bucket of items that are there. And it was easier to show it as one consolidated item than a whole bunch of those. If it was important, we could some more specifics to it, but generally it's really just looking at how things were anticipated versus how they came in. So I think it's a reflection of some responsibility on the design and construction team to look at things a little harder. So
I'm trying to remember at some point the gym floor was mentioned. Was that correct?
That was in the letter. We got that a lot.
Was one of the questions in the
That
letter.
was one of.
I understand that, but I believe,
Gym floor.
if I'm remembering correctly, you were talking about in the future, we're going to need to make some decisions. And was the gym floor one of those?
It is.
Okay.
I don't recall if it's shown in this budget, but we have a proposed material that is a synthetic material, and Maya would be a much better person to explain what it is, but it's not natural wood. It's got some cushions give to it. It's much more durable, much lower maintenance. It's a little bit more of a premium actually than putting in actual wood, which is beautiful. And there's nothing like it, but there is no give to it. There's acoustical issues with it and high maintenance.
Okay, so that's the decision that we're going to need to make.
Yeah, and I think it was something like $18,000 to go to the wood, excuse me, to $18,000 reduction to go to natural wood floors.
in round numbers. And so that was based on, there's no product specified yet. So it's really just looked at as a cost per square foot item. As we drill into the next budget milestones, that's something we can study further. But this is one of the items where I mentioned collectively we looked at, what some of the maintenance savings would be from not having having to maintain a wood floor. As you can imagine, water being tracked across the floors and such, you're going to have a lot of refinishings with that. Where the product that Dustin's team has spec'd out is used in a lot of recreational facilities. It's a really proven product with a good long-term low maintenance.
Especially with chairs and tables and setting those up and taking them down and up and down. The material we have proposed, there's enough give in the material that it doesn't get scratched and it doesn't leave the imprint there. So when someone's sitting in a chair for 3 hours there and get up and you pull the chair away, you're not stuck with scratches or indents.
Maya has her hand up. You want me to?
Please.
Hi, Maya.
Still connecting here, it looks like.
Was her hand up or was it waving?
I think her hand is waving.
And it's nothing.
Are you there, Maya?
Sorry, guys. It kicked me out for a second, and made me rejoin. So are you there?
Yep, we're here.
Hi, guys. So Dustin kind of already hit some of my bullet points, but the flooring that we've specified is a very multi-function flooring because of the various types of things you want to do in that gym space. It applies to all of those. So it's got athletic qualities, it's got acoustical properties, it's the lower maintenance. And to Dustin's point, if you're putting chairs and tables out there, it's not gonna indent the flooring for permanent divots and such. So it's a really kind of best case scenario for any kind of function that you want to do.
And you said it had a padding under it so it's instead of
It in
being
and of
sprung.
itself, yeah, it in and of itself is a cushiony type of a material.
Oh,
So it's not a separate padding, it is integral to the material itself. And that's where it gives some of that cushion. Again, for sports, if some people are running around and fall or whatever, it helps with that. And that's where you get that acoustical value too, because of the soft nature of it. There's some sound absorption to it.
Are we talking about what's planned now, or are we talking about a potential modification? That she's,
What's planned and budgeted for currently is the resilient floor that we're talking about.
okay, thank you.
And you can put lines on it for the
Yep.
sport, the basketball lines and so forth.
Yep.
Pickleball.
pickleball,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, I think you actually see that in our renderings too, typically. You will show you the sports flooring or the sport lines for different sorts of games.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll need to
Yep,
come
thanks.
back. Thank you, Maya.
Yep.
We'll need we need to come back in front of you to present the gym options, the renderings, the acoustic treatment. At that time, we will bring samples with us of the flooring,
Okay.
of the acoustic options. You get a feel for what it is that we're talking about. This particular product, it comes in different thicknesses. You can get it so thick that it feels like you're playing pickleball on a cloud. We wouldn't recommend that. Because you get to a point where you do start to leave indents in the floor, so you have to find that balance between comfort and resiliency and having the floor impressions bounce back to flat. So that's what we currently have priced, is what we feel that happy medium is.
If it's possible, could you name a location where it might be viewed as an installed product?
Absolutely, yeah. Would it be best to email that over to Bruce and then he can distribute that?
That's
Yeah,
fine.
that'd be
Me, all I'd need was I'd have to have access to it is all, my only request.
I'll get you into any place.
Multnomah Athletic Club in Portland, you can get, walk right in.
I'm here for the floor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dustin.
Any other questions?
I don't think so. Anybody?
Just about the process, I just want to make sure we're, from here, you're not asking for any decision this evening, correct?
It is a work session.
But you're not asking for a direction to head, anything like that.
No, we want to see this process play out with having received comments from Dan, who's here tonight, and Paul Dugan. And have a chance to respond to those comments and see what actions from there council would like to take before we recommend committing to just moving full steam ahead.
But at some point we'll ask, I'll have to nod your heads, yes or no, to go on to contract drawings,
To what?
to the contract drawings.
Oh.
Drawings we used to bid.
And I will clarify too. It's not that we can't make changes during the construction document phase. In fact, all of these that you see on here as scope reductions, we're having to do during the construction document phase. So even if there are, some level of changes that come out of responding to Sam's and Paul's letters, they could be of such nature that we're able to just accommodate those in the schedule that we have in developing construction documents. Somewhere there is that balance though, where if there's significant enough changes that we may need more time to implement those.
I'll ask one more thing. That's it, I promise. Thinking of the pavered plaza. And I think it's always been the plan that would have weekly vehicular traffic. So that is, that's a good idea that's a good product for that kind of traffic, or are there options?
Oh, there's always options. Yes, it can be a very good product for the level of vehicular traffic that we're looking at. Pavers they're able to flex a little bit, both good and bad. Pros and cons that come out of that, but we would want to put down a nice, heavy substrate, subbase, so a crushed gravel base of some thickness that the geotech will refer to their recommendation on what that section looks like to be able to support the loads that are anticipated and the frequency of those loads that are anticipated. we did look at or talk about the option of pricing that as stamped concrete. Because there would be some level of savings there. The problem we have is that the pattern that we're trying to establish back there is that traditional clads of nail and basket weave. That becomes a very arduous task for somebody to come out and try to stain that pattern in your stamped concrete, and then it doesn't last as long. The other option would be to do separate pours, separate concrete pours for each color, which would be even more labor intensive and probably would not result in any cost savings.
Yeah, it would be cost prohibitive with that many and intricate details.
Are the pavers, I can't, we might have discussed this, right? I just don't remember. Are the pavers permeable or impermeable?
We had envisioned impermeable. The reason for that is pervious pavers, just if it's many of your more economical systems, they tend to get gummed up, especially if you have traffic flow across them, then they stop acting as pervious pavers and they just become a source of weed growth that you have to maintain or moss. However, that is an option to look at if council's interested in going that route and trying to make that an pervious surface. There are materials to do that, but I would expect an ad with that.
Pavers kind of inherently permeable where there's drainage
They are.
into, especially if we're talking about the gravel base and.
Yeah, so when they install impermeable paver systems, typically they have like corners cut out of, the rectangular paver and you achieve this sort of pattern of unpaved surface, but it's a small enough surface that you can still drive over and it can maintain, holding that weight and that frequency of that load while still offering a higher level of imperviousness than just pavers without the notches being stacked up right against each other. Special shapes, basically.
But these that you've planned are impervious. That's all I'm trying to get at.
I believe that's currently the intent, yes.
Okay.
So I don't think that the design has gone as far as selecting a product for that. It's based on the imagery that's provided here and an assumed cost per square foot for those pavers.
Okay.
One thing that is nice about a paver system is that you can replace those pavers individually should some get damaged for whatever reason.
Okay, anything else? We'll move to good of the order. Anyone have anything?
Well, I do. This is just some information I got regarding our discussion last night that I wrote to Bill this morning and and he got back to me right away. I mean, I was so grateful. It was really great. Just it's really busy now. And I asked him whether the state needs to be involved in any manner when you rewrite a tree ordinance. And because they did have to be involved for the wetlands ordinance. And he said, no, they do not. It's not a state issue. It's a municipality can rewrite the tree ordinance like we did. What was it, 8 years ago when the planning commission did it, when I was on it? I don't think we did a great job, but we did it. And
At that time, we.
yeah, I guess that was sort of like the thinking at that time.
Right.
Looking back at it, I'm like, oh, anyway, but yeah, he did say that the reason wetlands involves the state is because they're regulated by the state and the state keeps the wetlands inventory, the Department of State Lands and Conservation, I think it is. And so, I can forward you his email if you want to have it more clarification, but that's what he basically said.
Less of an issue whether it's required and more of an issue of wouldn't it be a good idea to have a housing zoning expert look at what the impacts might be on potential housing?
Well, I think the tree committee decided that they wanted to do a tree ordinance to protect our trees and whatever tree canopy we had left. And the way it is written, it shouldn't really impact housing unless the only aspect of it that might impact housing was the ADU issue, which we're going to readdress.
So can I pop in real quick? I think the reason it has to go through the PAPA notice in the state is because it's in Title 17 though.
Right. Oh, yeah. It has to go through public notice.
Okay.
Just like any other thing. It was, so many of the ordinances we do have to go through a public notice process. Yeah, they all do.
Yeah, just because it's in Title 17, but if
Right.
it wasn't, you wouldn't have to do that.
Right.
Okay, just making sure that we.
That's true.
Because that still has to
Yeah.
happen, that portion still does.
Right. So you let everybody, you let all interested parties know that this is coming up and they are free to come and, to give their input into what they think this.
But it still goes through
Ordinance.
DLC.
The PAPA, yeah, but it's not we don't need our planning people can do that
Yeah.
without too much trouble. They've done it before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that that
Right.
one still does have to happen.
yeah, and they know how to do that.
Well, I guess in addition to ADUs, I just wonder about duplexes. I kind of imagine that, with the rules as proposed, my property, which is a duplex, could never be built. So,
Why is that?
because trees were removed.
Significant trees?
I don't have a historical vision.
I'd ask if you please read through the section again about how you build a house on a property with significant trees, and maybe that'll answer it for you, because this really doesn't, we're not talking about all trees. We're talking about significant trees, which are huge. So you might just read through it again and see that hierarchy of what you do if you want to build on a property. And eventually, if you can't build without cutting down a significant tree, we have to allow you to cut it down, because otherwise it could be a takings, so.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much, Bremick and Sita, and the rest of you, we'll see you in the morning.
Yeah.
9 a.m.
Oh.
Let's just asking how long before, I was asking myself, how